The alarm was already screaming when I reached the observation glass, and for one terrible second I thought I was about to watch another cadet die. My name is Threll Vantor, Master-at-Arms of the 9th Fleet Combat Academy, and I had sealed that chamber door with my own hands only minutes earlier. Inside, the gravity gauge climbed past 5 times standard, then 6, numbers that had never once been survived by a living cadet without collapse. Every warrior who had entered that room before her had gone down clutching their chest, their knees buckling under a weight their bodies were never built to carry. I braced myself to call for a medical team. Then I looked past the flashing warning light and saw her standing there, doing push-ups. Her name was Sable Ainsley, and she was the newest transfer cadet at our academy, the first human most of us had ever seen outside of a recruitment file. 2 days earlier she had asked me, quite calmly, whether she could use the gravity chamber for what she called cardio. I had assumed the translation had failed somewhere between her language and mine. Nobody used that chamber for anything except testing how much punishment a body could take before it broke. It was not a gymnasium. It was a wall we measured warriors against, and most of them did not clear it. The chamber itself was older than the academy. It came from the Ashari Compact, built centuries ago to recreate the crushing gravity of a homeworld none of us had ever seen with our own eyes. We kept it because nothing else told the truth about a body's limits so clearly. 6 times standard gravity. No illusions, no simulation tricks. Either your frame held, or it did not. I had watched the strongest species in known space fail that test. The Croth, with skeletons reinforced like armor plating, lasted the longest of anyone before Sable arrived, holding out for nearly 4 minutes before their joints locked in place. The Urzai, who could crush stone with their bare hands, folded in under 90 seconds, because their organs were simply not arranged to withstand that kind of pressure. I myself, on the best day of my own cadet training, had lasted 22 seconds before my legs gave out and the floor rushed up to meet me. So when Sable filed a waiver that morning requesting an extended session, I should have refused her outright. Regulation only permitted new cadets a 30-second qualification run, nothing more, and certainly nothing at full gravity. But the waiver was already signed and countersigned, with a handwritten note in the margin that read, "Not my first rodeo." I did not know what a rodeo was. I sealed the door anyway, mostly because I wanted proof of what I already suspected, which was that she had misunderstood the danger completely. I had never been more wrong about anything in my life. By the time the gauge hit 4 times standard gravity, a level that had already broken every previous cadet on record, Sable had moved from push-ups to something she called squats, bending her knees and rising again with the kind of rhythm you might use for a leisurely walk. Commandant Ovek arrived at the glass beside me just as she reached 5 times standard, and I watched his expression shift from disbelief to something closer to alarm, as though he expected the chamber itself to be malfunctioning rather than the cadet inside it. "Is she in distress?" he asked over the comm, his voice tight. Sable heard him through the internal speaker and wiped sweat from her face with her sleeve. "Nope," she said, breathing evenly. "Can we push it to 6? I want to try something." Ovek turned to me as though I might have an explanation. I had none. We authorized the increase against every instinct either of us had, and the gauge climbed past the maximum setting the chamber had ever run for a living subject. Sable did not drop to the floor. She did not even slow down. She crossed to the resistance bar bolted into the far wall, a device built to test grip strength under crushing load, a bar that had shattered the wrists of cadets who attempted even a single pull at half that gravity. She gripped it and began pulling herself up, again and again, counting under her breath in a language I did not recognize until I realized she was simply counting in her own tongue. 10 repetitions. She released the bar, checked something on a device strapped to her wrist, rested for what looked like exactly 1 minute, and then did 10 more. By the time the session ended, 40 minutes after it had begun, my hands were still shaking from the alarm that had never actually needed to sound. Sable stepped out of the chamber flushed and sweating, breathing hard but grinning like she had just finished something enjoyable rather than something that should have stopped her heart. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, as though she had simply gone for a run around the training yard. I did not have an answer for her. I requested an emergency meeting with the Academy's chief physician instead, because I needed someone to explain to me how a species this fragile-looking had just outperformed every warrior species we had ever tested. Dr. Kessa Rowe had served the fleet for 60 years, and she told me afterward that she had never seen anything in her career that unsettled her the way Sable's scans did. She pulled up the readings on the display between us, bone density numbers that made no logical sense against a frame so much smaller than our own, a skeletal structure reinforced in ways our instruments struggled to properly measure. It looked less like a body and more like something deliberately engineered, except it wasn't engineered at all. It had simply been used. Your species evolved under one steady gravity, Rose said to me, tapping the display. Constant, unchanging, and your bodies grew perfectly suited to exactly that and nothing more. Humans evolved under one gravity too, but somewhere along the way, they stopped being content with that. They built structures inside themselves called muscles and bones that do not simply exist to hold a body upright. They exist to be loaded, on purpose, again and again, until they grow stronger than they ever needed to be for ordinary life. Then, astonishingly, they load them even further. That sounds like something closer to punishment, I said, thinking of every cadet I had personally carried off that chamber floor over the years. That is what half our physicians said the first time they read human medical records, Roe answered. It is not punishment. They call it training, and remarkably, many of them choose to do it for enjoyment. I did not fully accept this explanation until I asked Sable herself, 3 days later, as she cooled down from a session that had pushed the chamber past 6 times standard gravity, a setting none of us had dared attempt, before her arrival changed everything we thought we knew. Back home, she said, toweling the sweat from her neck, we have an entire science built around this. Bones actually grow denser when you put stress on them the right way. Muscles get torn just slightly, and then heal back stronger than before. Long before anyone leaves the ground to travel through space, they train inside spinning machines that mimic exactly this kind of pull, so their hearts remember how to push blood upward even when gravity is fighting against them the whole time. She gestured toward the sealed chamber door behind her. Honestly, this is just a really well-built version of that same machine, except your resistance equipment happens to be better than what we usually get back home. Every warrior who has ever entered that chamber has failed it, I told her. Some of them nearly lost their lives in the attempt. That's because your bodies never had a reason to fight gravity just to survive, she said. Ours did, for longer than either of us can really imagine. Long before we figured out something as simple as chairs. She smiled at that last part, though I did not understand what made it funny to her. You're not weak, Threll. You're just built for a world that never really pushed you. Mine kept pushing, generation after generation, and we just never stopped pushing back. Word of what happened inside that chamber spread through the entire academy faster than any official report could have carried it. Cadets who had once approached the gravity chamber with genuine dread now gathered at the observation glass whenever Sable's sessions were scheduled, watching her the way you might watch some strange and wonderful event unfold in nature, something too remarkable to look away from. Commandant Ovek, against every instinct I had ever known him to have in decades of service, ordered a second chamber built, this one calibrated to let cadets build their tolerance gradually, following a new set of protocols that Dr. Rowe now referred to simply as human resistance training principles. 6 months have passed since that first alarm sent me running toward the observation glass, certain I was about to witness a tragedy. My own tolerance, properly tested under Rowe's new gradual protocol, has climbed from 22 seconds to just past 4 minutes, a number that would have seemed impossible to me not long ago. I am still, by every measurement the Academy keeps on record, nowhere close to what Sable Ainsley accomplishes before she has even eaten her morning meal. But I no longer think of that chamber as a wall, built to measure who among us is strong enough to be called a warrior. I think of it now the way she has always seemed to think of it, as a door. Something meant to be walked through again and again, a little further each time, until the very thing that once broke you completely becomes, eventually, almost unremarkable. She still asks me the same question every single morning, standing outside that sealed door with the same easy grin on her face. Same time today? I still do not fully understand why anyone would willingly choose to suffer through something so difficult purely for their own enjoyment. But after everything I have witnessed inside that chamber, I no longer doubt for a single moment that she genuinely does.